and only 28.2% of cabinet ministries globally are headed by women. The gender gap in leadership persists globally, not due to a lack of ambition amongst women, but due to a combination of other factors, which our panel will explore and deliberate on.
Please have your side chat. Yeah. 18 special. We're coming to you from Davos 2024, the 54th meeting of the World Economic Forum here in Davos. Today, we're going to discuss an issue that's very close to my heart. Those of you who watch us on CNBC TV 18 know that we've been running a campaign called Future Female Forward with the idea of championing the cause of gender parity, creating equal employment opportunities for both men and women, and ensuring that meritocracy rules the workplace. To take that conversation forward today and talk about the economic impact of parity and why parity matters and why we should be investing in it from a government's perspective, the social sector's perspective, and the private sector's perspective, I have a very interesting panel here with me. Minister Smriti Irani, right in the center of all things, as always, in between the social sector and the private sector, because the government's role, she believes, is going to be to play facilitator. Anita Zaidi of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, thank you very much for joining us, and Dipali Goenka of the Wellspun Group. Dipali, it's great to have you here. Anita, let me start by talking to you on the need for us to invest in parity, the economic case for that, because I know that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has been building that argument for a while now.
Thank you so much, Shireen, and thank you for the invitation to this panel. So we know that gender parity, gender equality, is correlated with economic prosperity and with societal progress. Yet we are so far behind in achieving gender parity. We think we're 100 or 120 years behind. And we also know that no matter where you're born in the world, if you're born a girl, your life is going to be harder. Why is that? And what do we do about it? There are so many issues. There are issues at the individual level. There are issues at the family level. There are issues at the societal level. And there's issues at organization level. And these tend to be sector specific, right? And so you can take the sector that I know the best, global health, which I know both from a private perspective as well as public perspective, and now through the Gates Foundation. Lots of women enter this sector. This is 70% of global health is female. But only 5% of top leadership is female, right? And the issues are all around a lot of organizational barriers that women face to progress. So it's not a pipeline problem, right? Yep. And so the economic, and then what is missing out then? What's missing is talent at the top, right, in global health. And Minister Irani and we were just discussing, if we invested in maternal and women's health, how important is children as part of that, right? And we tend to forget. Yeah. And of course, the other barrier that holds women back is the childcare responsibilities, right? Which I would say family. And we think that this is an individual.
It should be family.
Yeah. I mean, we think of it as an individual problem, right? It should be actually beyond family. It is society's job to, to make sure that women have access to the best childcare possible, right? So the economic return, I'll give you a health example for gender parity. It's a little different from what you would think, but investing in, so women's health is a very neglected area.
Yeah.
If we invest in women's health, right, the economic return, so invest in women's health at the same level as we invest in men's health. The economic return on that is going to be $1 trillion by 2040. Okay, and what's the pathway? The pathway is, of course, saving cost that is spent in ill health, but it's also economic. It's economic activity that women can participate in, income-generating activity, and also productivity.
Yeah.
Right. So the need for gender parity will unlock so much economic potential and economic development. A lot of the work that we are doing in investing in at this, so from the Gates Foundation, we are investing a lot in
Women's health.
Women's leadership, actually. Women's leadership in health, but also women's leadership in economics and women's leadership in law. And one of the countries that we have fantastic partnerships with is in India, both with the government and with the private sector, but also with philanthropy to see how can we promote women in leadership and how can we get to gender parity status. Now, there's many exciting things that have happened in India recently. I can keep going on.
No. I'll let you go on with all the exciting stuff. So.
For example, the recent landmark legislation on women's representation in government, right, in parliament. So the 33% reserve seats. That's going to really be a game changer.
Yeah.
Then the work that Minister Irani's ministry is doing on gender and gender responsive budgeting, women-led development. This is coming through in G20, not just for India but for Africa as well. Through African Union has now joined the G20. I mean, so and one of the things that we are hoping get to work on together is on gender. Gender as a large issue to address. So let me stop there. I can keep going on. We have a
take a breath. Take a breath. We'll
okay. But I'll come back to the private sector.
I will come back. I will come back to you with more on the private sector. But I think you've very comprehensively summed up for us the challenges. And it's not an India problem, as you point out. It is a global problem. Many of the issues that you spoke of, whether it's the retention issue, it's the leadership issue, these are global challenges. I've just come away from a panel where we had the finance minister of Indonesia and we had the foreign affairs minister of Ecuador, and exactly the same conversation happening there as well. So this is a global challenge that requires us to look at ways of intervening. And of course, the interventions will be custom made, keeping the local context in mind. But Dipali, let's get the private sector's perspective in, and let's talk about the economic opportunity that's opened up when you bring more women into the workforce. Give me an example of what you've been able to do at Welspun in order for you to do that, and the benefits that have accrued on account of it.
Shireen, I think I was just thinking when, you were talking, there are a lot of examples that we have today. Let me start by myself. I started at the age of 30 when my girls were 10 and 7. I was a homemaker, got on board. And again, the whole thing came in that whether Welspun was serious about doing business. It started from there. Today, I must say, when I started, there were 7% women. Today, we have 30% women. Now, let me give a perspective on different things. Where, when we start from communities, how we are working very closely with the women in the communities and upskilling them. They are earning around 20,000 rupees every month. They're operating their own bank account, and the children are going to school. I think nothing can be more powerful for a country like India, where I think it's so important that how we can just impact the education and the literacy in India, because that's the biggest challenge that we have. Now, when we talk about blue collar, I must give you a small example. There was a girl called Avni Bhadra. We did a training program with an NGO called Swasti, where we did program with the families, where how could families respect and accommodate women and, understand and take on the workload. Today, thanks to that, Avni was chosen by Walmart to go and represent India out of 2,000 factories. It gave rise to around, now I have 30% women working in the blue collar. Then I talk about the white collar. I have my CEO for my retail business who is a woman. But the important thing is, how are you accommodating? How are you giving them kind of let them, like a working from home kind of an option, or understanding what are the other things that you have to do. So that's a very interesting one. Secondly, I must tell you, we have around more than 3,000 women in a girls' hostel coming in from different parts of the country. The important aspect, they're undernourished. They don't know. They're absolutely, when they come in, they're absolutely not sure about themselves. So we have the IGNU program, and there were 45 girls who graduated from there today. And that's such a powerful thing that, they have a roadmap from not just, running a weaving machine to becoming a manager as well. And now programs like, upskilling them to Industry 4.0, DG Smart, technology, I think is going to be a very interesting one, Shireen. So I think for me, We have around 15,000 to 20,000 people working. The impacts are all over. And I think to your point, Doctor, I think we have these undernourished programs that we do where I think the most important thing, women is completely forgotten. How are we looking and taking care of them could be a very important bit. And
No,
I think
absolutely. We cannot afford to have an invisible majority, and we cannot ensure, we have to ensure that women are not treated as an invisible majority. But what I also want to now get the minister to comment on, you've heard what Anita has had to say, what the private sector has had to say as well. There is need for intervention. There's need for the big picture, top-down intervention, and there's need for the bottom-up intervention. Many examples that both of them have shared for us. What do you believe is the role that the government can play in collaboration with both the social sector and the private sector to drive this change?
I think for the first time in the history of our democracy, women have taken center stage in governance agendas. The Prime Minister has very resolutely, in 2014, he began his governance drive with making central the issue of sanitation and women. And he conjoined it with dignity. To build 110 million toilets, individual households one, I think was never a political priority for any government. There were many naysayers who thought that why, and it is not a politically profitable endeavor. But if you look at the World Bank report from 2010-11 about the status of sanitation in India, there was a negative burden of -6% on the GDP of India because of the lack of such facilities. If you looked at records of crime against women, and I dial back to the channel that you belong to, your channel had aired a report, I still remember, which spoke about violence against women. 43% of the cases came forth when women went outside to defecate. So building of toilets not only addressed the need of dignity and to begin your day with that sense of safety, it addressed an economic burden on the country's GDP. It addressed an issue of violence against women. So when you invest in women, from a policy point of view, it has a multiplier effect in your society. When the Prime Minister started Jan Dhan, it was not started for women. It was not a gendered financial initiative, but 230 million women ended up having a bank account. The saving accounts numbers for women went up from somewhere around 40% to 78, 81%, the last count. What was fascinating for me is the success of Mudra. 400 million loans given without collateral in India, of which 70% beneficiaries are women-owned businesses. Now, Shireen, you know this well, that women from the most challenging financial and societal backgrounds, imagine that woman drawing up a business plan, going to a bank, convincing the manager, servicing her business need through a loan. NPA is somewhere around 2%. Of the 70% of the 400 million loans, we genuinely have made a case for investment in gender. The issue is, how do you define or understand the word parity? What is parity? Is it only equal pay for equal work? Or it's also equal capacity to be a decision maker in your community? What is parity? Is it to just count the number of women who are in a cabinet? Or to also celebrate the 1.5 million women who are winning in your panchayats? Now, a localized election in a smaller body of voters without fiscal support is a miracle. Those women don't get counted today on the global scale when it comes to political empowerment. It was nice, Ms. Zaidi, to talk about the 33% reservation in Indian Parliament. Historic. We're the only country on this promenade which has not only a gender lounge, but a gender legislation that politically empowers. The issue is that what is parity? In decision making, how does government facilitate it? A controversial issue that Dr. Zaidi possibly will have a challenge with if she tries to have it legislated back home is medical termination of pregnancy at 24 weeks. The fact that this legislation that was waiting approval for 4 decades passed in both houses of parliament without a murmur from any man, political or non-political, speaks volumes about the culture in our country when it comes to the issue of gender. I do not say that we are a part of a utopian ecosystem, but at least today Indians at home and across the world know that there is a government that has applied itself to gender justice. My gender budgeting numbers as of the last fiscal year has jumped up by 126%, which is a huge jump. And gender spend is not limited to one agency, one department doing nutrition or health. It is a collaboration between 50 plus departments, which we've never witnessed before. So, how do you define parity? And how do you define equity or equality? Today, at least, it's been looked upon from various prisms when it comes to gender. But I think that because we as a gender have faced many a bias, we don't want to now leave our children behind. Women have now in India become a decisive political vote bank. And the credit for it does go to Prime Minister Modi because he invested in the female agenda when not many political leaders wanted to stick their neck out. The issue is children are not a vote bank. They don't go to vote, but they need that added protection. We can provide it. And I believe that's the government's role, to facilitate an environment. But the issue is that many steps have to be undertaken by the private sector.
Yeah.
And the private sector in a democracy like ours cannot be adjudicated upon to be just and fair. It has to be given a direction, like in our labor codes, equal pay for equal work, an internal complaints committee to report sexual harassment at work, creches for mothers who are working, 26 week. The ILO, and this is not often spoken about, had proposed 14 weeks leave for the perspective of maternity benefit. We've actually gone over it and said 26 weeks. But what is parity? How many of those women are scared to come back to work because they fear a loss of opportunity? So that's where the government is applying itself, from safety, security, not only of opportunity, not only of income, but I think from also the larger perspective, being that bridging gap between the people and the private segment. It's time for the private sector to measure up.
It's time for the private sector to measure up. Anita and Dipali, the mics are coming your way now. Anita, go ahead.
Can I also, so the minister spoke very eloquently, but can I also give credit for two other things? One is the...
As long as you're giving them credit.
I need Ms. Zaidi on all my panels.
One is the immense progress India has made in reversing the sex ratio, right, at birth, where there used to be many more boys than girls born, and that has changed, and that is government effort, right? It's huge. And the other one is the excellent, fantastic work with the self-help groups, the National Rural Livelihoods Mission, where women have had access to loans, and those loans and grants and women's collectives have made a huge difference in women's lives, in women's livelihoods, in their ability to have agency. And actually, there is very strong data to show that it prevents gender-based violence.
It gladdens my heart.
It
gladdens my heart to listen to Ms. Zaidi. So let me add a little bit to the celebration of the self-help group that she has undertaken. I think that self-help groups who are looked upon financially, and especially from the big investment perspective, is very rudimentary, not given the due respect that it deserves. To have a grassroots economic movement valued at around $37 to $38 billion is not a joke.
Yeah.
And to have an NPA, again, which totters around 2%, is not a joke. These women have shown fiscal discipline. These women have shown fiscal prudency, and they have innovated at the grassroots. The government, in fact, if you look at our collective spend on self-help groups across all ministries, it will match the budgets of many big ministries like defense. What is, I think, functionally also applaudable, and I'm adding this, is the Prime Minister's insistence to ensure technology and new age technology is infused in this ecosystem. The Prime Minister's initiative for drones for self-help groups is a fantastic initiative. He's introducing technology to precision farming, and women are becoming the deliverer of such quality service. So I think from a gender perspective, technology perspective, and a grassroots revolution in precision agriculture, moving it from traditional methodologies to, like I said, precision agriculture, the fact that women will be the flag bearers is not something which is often spoken about, but I think is a cause for celebration.
Oh, plenty of celebration. But Dipali, the challenge has been thrown to the private sector to show up and ensure that we do a lot better. The progress that has been made needs to be built on, and there's a long distance, a long journey to cover.
Shireen, so there's lots happening, but I think there are a lot of things at the ground level. What are the things that we need to do as corporates as well? So whether it's the mentorship that we need to take on, creating women groups. So at Wellspun, we have a Women of Wellspun, where all of them, come together at all levels. Whether it's finance help, there's health, the financial, like understanding, or your own health, if you're going to be talking about.
Yeah.
And the third is the allyship. So we just launched a new program where the men are going to see how many women are in their organization at all levels. Because the reality is very different in the terms of, I've heard, and I'm talking about our organization, when they're hiring a woman, she'll go for a maternity leave. What's going to happen? And I think that's what is something that we really need to talk about. There's a lot the government's done. And I must say that even the third shift started in Gujarat where, the women are coming to work. And that's incredible, right? But the reality of training the entire ecosystem, whether it's your peers, it's your family, it's your communities, all has to go hand in hand together.
No, absolutely. I mean, that's part of the sort of behavioral chain and societal conditioning that we need to acknowledge and we need to talk about as well. But let's talk about the leadership crisis and the leadership challenge that you spoke of, Anita. And as I said, it's not India, it is global. How do we fix it?
Yes, so you have to look at all of the barriers, right? And so the Gender Equality Division at the Gates Foundation is now 3 years old. And one of the first initiatives that we started was the Women in Leadership Initiative that's looking at global health, economics, and law. And we're doing a lot of research to understand what works to get women into the labor force, what works to retain women in the labor force, how does care, different types of care make a difference, where do you really need to change best practice. So one of the partnerships that I'm very happy that we've launched in India is with the CII to set up a center for women's leadership, which is also going to do research to understand what works and also try to incentivize the corporate sector for best practice, right? Looking at best practice and then giving awards for like best practice that here's this organization, they are following the 6-month maternity leave. They have
to,
flexible.
it's mandated by law.
but they don't do it.
That's not
right?
good behavior.
But they don't, but they don't do it. But they don't do it, right? I mean, so all of these things, how do you, because it's very easy to have a woman not come back to work, right?
Yeah.
Because you can have a hostile environment.
Yeah.
So that's what it means by not just saying that you have the 6 months, but how many women are actually coming back and working, right? So then looking at sectors where there are no women, like auto sector in India has very few women, and it's a very big sector. How do you get women into that sector? What are the barriers to entry? The companies are actually interested.
Actually, we now have lines which are all women lines in auto in India now.
So there are a lot of things now. India is also really expanding the airline. What
we have the largest number of female pilots.
Right.
Yes.
So how do you get to parity there? Like what are the issues and how do you
think men are ruining this panel.
So there are all of these, but also the lower level jobs, right, around the airline industry, because there will be a new airport, there will be construction, there are all of these things. So there are all of these opportunities that one has to look at, like how do you attract women, how do you retain women, how do you promote women into leadership roles? Because one thing is clear, when women are in leadership roles, the world will look better.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
I am absolutely delighted to listen to Ms. Zaidi. I still remember this back office of the CII where one of her colleagues was with me, and she said, do you have a wish list? And I said, can we institutionalize a center in CII doing X, Y, Z? And they said, yes. I said, write the check for the industry. So when you asked me, how do we become facilitators between private sector and the philanthropist, the CII Center for Female Leadership is one of the most recent and most celebrated, I think, initiatives which has been done by the government, but is something that is being led independently now between industry and the philanthropic partner. I think that I would want a wish list for the industry. because
We're all
ears.
ears.
Dipali's all ears. So you rightfully said that we have the largest number of pilots, females in the world. The EV segment has 30% of the workforce, which is female, 1.5 million units sold last year. And this segment of our economy in electric vehicles is positioned to grow by 40% in the next 7 to 8 years. There is an ancillary part of that segment, which is about battery charging points, or for that matter, servicing and design lines, which has huge potential for females, not only to become part of the labor force, but become dominant vendors in that segment. Can industry identify the emerging technologies and emerging markets where women can not only be reduced to employees, but become vendors to reckon with and become a part of the global supply chain? One. The second aspect is, Dipali would possibly die when I say this, is how to teach female vendors to negotiate their contracts better. Because when they compete with males in the supply chain, they tend to undercut their profits or their contracts only so that they can land the job. She may have a different experience, but that is a reality for many a women-led small business.
Yes.
The third request I would have is, when I talk about the success of Mudra, 70% benefits to women, 400 million loans, which means that even Swanidhi, which the Prime Minister did, for street vendors, offtake by women who have taken 3 rounds of loans, paid back, started from 5,000 rupees, now are at 50,000 rupees, is overwhelming. Can the industry help us identify those female enterprises that have continuously shown not only fiscal discipline, not only have a great growth agenda, but have the capacity then to go on to a higher scope and become maybe mid-sized companies, maybe enterprises of great value? If the industry just does this much, we are not, Shireen, every time our conversation is reduced to the number of women in boardrooms.
Yeah.
Now, that is a battle which has been fought over a number of years and lost in the private sector, which the government has nothing to do with. The government legislated it. Industry has to measure up. But if you can do this much in terms of negotiation of contracts, helping identify women who have capacity to become mid-sized companies, how do women go onto the social stock exchange or to the stock exchange, get listed? That'll bring a world of change.
Dipali, are you up for the challenge? And as far as the supply chain issue is concerned, I'm sure she has a story to tell, because they're suppliers to global chains like Walmart, like Walmart. So,
But
so you've obviously driven a hard bargain yourself, Dipali.
So I'll tell you one thing, Shreen, for us at Wellspun, it's a women-held business. It's led by, all the packages that go to Walmart or Sam's has a women-led business logo going. But the important aspect to Smritiji's and our minister's point of view, in the terms of women vendors, I think for textiles, we have more than 1,000 vendors. The ecosystem and the bedrock is made by MSMEs, right? And we are working on those practices. So a lot of it is, because we have interfaces and tech platforms, and also and doing it sustainably. A lot of our vendors are listed on the SEDEX platform. So, it's how you do the ecosystem and the whole business in the terms of the true ESG manner. So yes, that's happening. And while we're promoting women at Wellspun, we're also looking at promoting women, as partners as well. So that's definitely happening as well. So because if our customers like Walmart and all are supporting us, so truly we will also do that as well.
Well, very quickly. Well,
I was going to say, private sector, please don't forget the role of media.
We're playing our part too.
Right,
We're playing our part.
No, but if I talk about media, there's only 12% leadership roles for women.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So there is a scope everywhere.
Well, we've taken the lead on that.
And also on the norm side, right? So that people can see what women can achieve.
Yes.
Right? And
that is exactly the point of Future Female Forward, where we
Exactly.
are showcasing a wide array of women role models, giving women voices, as well as representation, and I think that matters. But, we could have continued this conversation. As you can see, it's far from done, far from over. But many thanks to Smriti Irani, Dipali Goenka and Anita Zaidi for joining us here on why investing in parity matters and the multiplier impact of that. Appreciate your time. We are going to take a break here on CNBC TV 18, but there's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a moment with more.
We're going to anoint Anita as ambassador. Thank you. Thank you. Look at how excited. I know. I wanted to stop. What we've done. It was very kind of you to pay our compliments.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.